Hello, my name is Dan Fercucci. I'm with YouFirst Services located in Buffalo, New York, and I'm excited to welcome you to this webinar regarding isolation rooms and sterilization of indoor air in schools. In this webinar, I'm going to discuss the science behind indoor air quality, look at the difference between air filtration and air sterilization, provide a brief insight into the main technology used today for isolation rooms, and lastly, I will discuss the funding currently available for K-12 schools that can be used to implement SteriSpace, a first-of-its-kind air sterilization technology. YouFirst Services was established in 2013 to bring market-innovative scientific healthcare-related inventions designed to enrich the lives of others. Some of these technologies were born through collaboration with the University at Buffalo. There are three key areas of focus at YouFirst Services: disinfection and sterilization, infectious disease control, and oral health care. In this webinar, I'm going to emphasize on disinfection and sterilization. Focusing on improving indoor air quality in schools is crucial due to its effect on the health and academic performance of students and staff, as well as limiting costly COVID-19 related shutdowns. Despite common misconceptions about transmission of SARS-CoV-2, the data is clear. The problem is shared air, not shared surfaces. In fact, there's not a single documented case of SARS-CoV-2 being transmitted as a result of touching shared surfaces. Because of this, the act of closing schools for deep cleaning of surfaces is largely ineffective and not supported by science to prevent disease transmission. To effectively protect students and staff, schools need to invest in isolation areas by implementing SteriSpace to reduce the risk of superspreading events in the schools. The second reason why I want to focus on sterilization of indoor air is because less than 10% of reported global SARS-CoV-2 infections have occurred outdoors, so the focus must be indoors. Plus, studies show that respiratory droplets of various sizes are trapped in a turbulent gas cloud that evaporates fast, allowing them to travel up to 26 feet indoors. Drops fall continuously, depending on weight and other factors, and the most visible drops fall within 6 feet. We know with certainty that the COVID-19 virus can indeed be spread throughout a facility via the central ventilation system. SARS-CoV-2 has been identified in air filters and building ducts in hospitals with COVID-19 patients. Such locations can be reached only by airborne respiratory aerosols. There is consistent, strong evidence that SARS-CoV-2 spreads by airborne transmission. Although other routes can contribute, we believe that the indoor airborne route is likely to be predominant. The public health community must act accordingly and without further delay. I'm excited to introduce you to SteriSpace, air sterilization technology. SteriSpace has set a new standard of care for air sterilization. In fact, the term air sterilization never existed up until now, because it was not technically possible to sterilize air prior to SteriSpace. SteriSpace uses patented compressive heating of air to inactivate biological contaminants, including viruses, bacteria, and hardy spores. The temperature of the compressed air reaches up to 464 degrees Fahrenheit, and of course, all pathogens are completely rendered inactive at this temperature. The sterilized air is then cooled to 100 degrees as it passes through a high-efficiency heat exchanger. The counterflow heat exchanger is brilliantly efficient at energy recovery, so the system's power consumption during continuous steady state is only 4.6 kilowatts. Studies have shown that the COVID-19 virus is rendered inactive at temperatures higher than 70 degrees Celsius. So SteriSpace, operating at 240 degrees Celsius, a temperature that is 3 times higher, with proven destruction of even the most thermally resistant bacterial spores, is able to achieve thermal inactivation of various viral species. FDA released guidance on the resistance of microorganisms and noted how highly susceptible the COVID-19 virus is to inactivation. The challenge with COVID-19 is not the ability to kill it, rather the high transmission rate, especially in confined indoor spaces. Schools across the United States have adopted various strategies to limit the risk of COVID-19 transmission and reduce disruptions to in-person learning. School reopening guidelines do not provide an adequate strategy for isolation rooms. The guidelines instead focus on using PPE and cleaning and disinfecting shared surfaces. But as I mentioned, the problem is shared air, not shared surfaces. It is essential that schools remain open to in-person learning. In-person school is proven to have psychosocial and health benefits beyond educational enrichment for many children, particularly those who depend on school-based services for physical, nutritional, and mental health support. In schools, SteriSpace can be configured to create negative pressure rooms to isolate students, faculty, and staff with a known infection. Many schools now have an isolation room, but oftentimes the air in the room is shared with other rooms in the facility, which defeats the purpose of having an isolation room. By using SteriSpace to create negative pressure, the pathogenic particles in the isolation room will not spread to other rooms throughout the school. This helps to ensure infection containment and reduce possible disease outbreak and superspreading in the school, which could cause a shutdown. SteriSpace can also be configured to create positive pressure in a room to either protect immunocompromised individuals from pathogens and external ambient air, or to create a barrier. Let me show you how this would play out in a dedicated nurse's isolation suite using this floor plan. Provision of health services in school must include health offices with sterile air and adequate infection control. We recommend 3 separate air treatment zones in the suite. Infected individuals go into zones B and C, which both have negative air pressure to prevent the migration of contaminated airborne particles back into the school. Infected individuals would remain in these isolation rooms until someone is able to pick them up in the anteroom, maintained with positive air pressure. The positive air pressure creates an airlock to further ensure that potentially harmful pathogens do not spread throughout the school. The SteriSpace units must run at least 1 hour before scheduled occupancy and during all occupied hours. Now, some of you might be thinking that this type of dedicated suite would be great, but might not be practical at this time for various reasons. If that's the case, no worries, because there's still a lot that can be done to keep everyone safe. The school may currently have a room that is being used as a wellness room or nurse's station, where 6 students and staff are temporarily housed until someone can pick them up. You will want to make sure that the air in this room is sterile and has negative pressure, especially if the room is in the main office or middle of the school. The negative pressure ensures that the expired air of the infected person is exhausted directly to be sterilized instead of being recirculated to other areas of the school. SteriSpace can be installed as a standalone unit on the exterior ground to treat the air in a room, as illustrated on the left, or can be integrated with an existing HVAC system on the rooftop. If a facility does not have an HVAC system, but rather has a boiler system, or unit ventilators, or some other system, the SteriSpace technology can still be integrated into the facility as essentially the primary air handling system. SteriSpace does not trap the pathogens, but rather kills them using patented compressive heating technology. This technology has been tested and validated extensively through funding by the U.S. Department of Defense and has repeatedly demonstrated an effective kill rate of 99.9999, achieving a sterility assurance level of 6 log reduction. Anything less than 6 log kill is not considered sterilization. Some of this testing was done in collaboration with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at Research Triangle Institute, and the kill rate achieved there in a single pass was a staggering 99.99999, otherwise referred to as a 7-log kill, which is completely unheard of. Please contact us if you want the abstract for any of these studies. SteriSpace is the only air sterilization technology of its kind available today. It is scalable in size and can achieve airflow rates varying between 250 to 5,000 cubic feet per minute. The compressed air is treated uniformly in a single pass, so there is no untreated air or leaks. By adding a chemical catalyst, the system can also eliminate select exhaust pollutants, VOCs, and common industrial chemicals. SteriSpace does not require noxious, corrosive, or hazardous chemicals to destroy biological contaminants, nor does it require the disposal of filters laden with biohazards. It uses more of a natural, holistic process to sterilize the air, which doesn't have any toxic byproducts and is environmentally friendly. Today, HEPA filtration is considered the gold standard for air treatment. And with HEPA, the first obvious thing we need to realize is that the system merely traps airborne pathogens instead of killing them. HEPA filters create a breeding ground for harmful contaminants such as mold and bacteria that can grow on them. And it is well known that filters are not able to trap all pathogens. HEPA filters are 99.97% effective at trapping particles that are 300 nanometer or larger in size. But the problem is that almost all viruses, including SARS-CoV-2, are smaller than 300 nanometer in size. In fact, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is between only 90 and 120 nanometer, so there's no surprise if it passes right through. Experts in filtration science know that it's not just the smallest airborne particles that are hardest to filter out, but also the medium-sized ones, those that are too small to be captured through inertia, but too large to be captured due to the Brownian motion. Another drawback of HEPA filters is the large pressure drop that it creates, which could be a burden on the HVAC system and cost prohibitive. Also, HEPA filters require frequent replacement, which results in high operating costs. When filters are replaced, it's recommended that the technician suit up to protect themselves, but how often does that happen? And is it possible for harmful pathogens to be reintroduced back into the air when the filters are replaced? Air is continuously contaminated by airborne pathogens. The dissemination of pathogens from HVAC-associated transmission is widely known, given that numerous studies have shown that biological pathogens can grow on filters, negatively affecting the quality of filtration. HEPA filtration must always be augmented because air treatment in facilities fall into two main categories: air filtration and air sterilization. Air filtration, of course, involves passing air through a system to capture the physical contaminants. Air sterilization, on the other hand, denatures cellular structures within the airborne contaminants to render them inactive. The air quality management strategy must include a combination of air filtration and air sterilization in a complementary manner as part of an overall infection control management strategy. Knowing that HEPA must be augmented, alternative technologies have recently come to the forefront, such as UVC and bipolar ionization. There is a lot of excitement in the media about these technologies, but we rarely hear about the drawbacks associated with them. Bipolar ionization cleans the air inside buildings using an electronic charge to create a plasma field filled with ions. Unfortunately, bipolar ionization has hazardous environmental effects. Ionizers generate potentially dangerous levels of ozone, which could be harmful to us and our environment. The long-term CO2 buildup negatively impacts cognitive abilities, which is of particular concern for schools, because as we know, children are more vulnerable than adults to the adverse effects of breathing CO2, in addition to inhaling indoor air contaminants. Studies have shown that particle deposition increases with charge, so using ion generators may not reduce the dose of particles to the lungs. And the efficacy of bipolar ionization is questionable, and certainly cannot make the claim of air sterilization. UVC emits shortwave ultraviolet light to kill or inactivate microorganisms by destroying nucleic acids and disrupting their DNA, so they no longer perform their cellular functions. However, just like bipolar ionization, UVC lamps generate ozone, and some UVC lamps also contain toxic mercury. Of course, the room must be unoccupied when the UVC lights are illuminated, unless the lights are in the ductwork. UVC rays disinfect by line of sight, meaning that only areas that the UV light shines on directly will be treated, so the shadow areas will not be treated. UVC lamps lose their efficacy by 15% every 6 months to a year, so a frequent replacement of the bulbs is required. Microorganisms require direct exposure to the UV light in order for them to be rendered inactive, and germs attached to dust particles can escape from UVC treatment. Also, humidity in the room diminishes the efficacy of UVC, and the distance from the source is inversely proportional to the efficacy. Another drawback is that this system requires quote-unquote exposure time, which could be several minutes. Microorganisms that pass through UV light with some velocity may not get enough exposure time to be affected. So here as well, the efficacy is questionable and certainly cannot make the claim of air sterilization. Now is a great time to implement SteriSpace to improve indoor air quality in high-risk and highly populated areas of the schools, such as the health screening areas, including the nurses' isolation suites. As you know, the Biden-Harris administration established the American Rescue Plan, the ARP, and within that plan is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, also known as the ESSR Fund. This provides $122 billion in relief for pre-K through 12 schools, including projects to improve air quality in these facilities. In March of 2021, states received access to 2/3 of their ESSR allocation, a total of $81 billion. To receive the remaining $41 billion, each state must develop and submit a use of funds plan to the U.S. Department of Education for approval prior to June 7, 2021. To learn more about how your school can apply for the remaining available ESSR funds, please visit www.oese.ed.gov/offices. It's important to realize that in-person learning also has financial benefits for the school system, state and local government, and the community at large. Yes, there's investment required to improve indoor air quality in the schools. However, the benefit far outweighs the cost. With improved air quality, you will see an increase in student attendance. And remember that many schools get paid when students are in the seat. So when you look at that benefit alone, you will see an increase in school district revenue per year that far outweighs the initial investment. Furthermore, if a student gets sick, a parent or a grandparent may need to stay home from work to care for the student, which results in an exorbitant caregiver cost. So in other words, the ROI is highly favorable. When it comes to protecting the people who make up a school, nothing less than sterilization should be acceptable for air quality. SteriSpace sets a new standard of care to improve indoor air treatment, eliminating the airborne pathogens that may cause disease outbreaks, as we have experienced with the recent pandemic. SteriSpace can be easily integrated to fit many environments while providing the best of both worlds, the highest level of efficacy available on the market, without the drawbacks or side effects of alternative technologies. Thanks for taking the time to watch this webinar. Please contact us to schedule a virtual meeting with one of our air sterilization consultants. The team here at YouFirst Services is excited to collaborate with you in keeping your students, faculty, and staff in good health.